Now, Eskom has submitted a new revised tariff structure to energy regulator Nersa. It says existing tariff structures need to be modernised to reflect the changing electricity environment. Now, if the revisions are accepted, you could find yourselves paying a different amount for electricity from April next year. That doesn't sound like good news. Let's bring in Professor Sampson Mamphweli to join us. He's the director of the Centre for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies at Stellenbosch University. Prof, good to have you back on eNCA. First of all, what does a change to these structures look like based on our electricity at the moment? Because if it's based on our electricity, it's not a very consistent structure, I'm expecting.
Good morning, Gareth and the viewers. Yes, Eskom has submitted the request for the change in the tariff structure. First, I must indicate to the viewers that this submission is different from the submission for the increase, the request for increase in the tariffs that they normally do on a multi-year price determination basis. So this one is looking basically at the fact that the tariff structure that we have has been overtaken by so many events. So, for instance, the peak has changed in terms of the hours, the number of hours and the time of the day. Eskom is going through the unbundling process, which will result in three separate companies. We have things such as solar PV that we didn't have in the past. So Eskom is introducing things such as net billing for people with solar PV on their roof, which basically means that when you produce more electricity during the day, you can then feed that electricity into the grid, and then there will be some kind of revenue that you can earn from there. There are things such as your wheeling offset and banking that we didn't have in the past, because many people didn't have, or businesses as well, didn't have solar PV on their roof. Eskom has introduced some of these in the past, but I think it's now the time for them to formalize them. What the structure looks like, they're introducing in some cases things such as your generation capacity charge, because in most cases the tariff, the Eskom tariff that we're paying is not cost reflective. For instance, there are people who are paying the fixed capacity charges, especially businesses, and in some cases in homes we were not paying the fixed capacity charges, we were paying the energy charges, which is basically the kilowatt hours that you use.
And that's what runs on your little meter outside your house. You're getting charged for that. Prof, help me understand. There's two questions I want to ask you. The first of all is, when we talk about as of April next year, April 2023, we could be paying different prices for electricity. When we say different, do we mean higher prices for electricity? Because I don't think South Africans have the money for another kind of increase. What do we mean by different? Is that what you're referring to? If you've got solar, you'll pay less, but there might be penalties because you're going off the grid a little bit more. Is that what we're talking about?
So when we say different, it could be higher, it could be lower. When I look at the tariff structure itself, some customers may pay lower. For instance, Eskom is proposing that households go on to the time of use tariff, which we didn't have in the past as households. It was mainly in the business sector. So if we go on a time of use tariff and you use electricity, say for instance, between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning during the week, it means that during that time you will pay a bit more than what you would pay if you use the electricity during off-peak period. So it's not a straightforward answer to say people will pay more or people will pay less. It's depending on a number of variable factors.
Do you suspect, Professor, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, so I may need to let you go in a couple of moments. Do you get a sense as well, though, that this time of use tariff, I'm curious about this one. There's a lot of people, I'm sure you've seen this, Professor, complaining that their energy bills, their electricity bills are the same even during severe blackouts or load shedding, when on some days you could not have power for up to 12 hours, but they're still paying for the same amount of electricity, even though they don't have it because of the load shedding. Would this time of use tariff deal with that issue, do you think? Because it does seem quite unfair to pay for power you don't have.
Yeah, so the time of use tariff will deal with that as well. But it's quite surprising that people will pay the same if at some point they didn't have power or they were not using, because in most cases we're using the energy charge, which is basically your kilowatt hours, which basically means that you are paying for the electricity that you use. But the time of use tariff also has got quite a lot of benefits if you manage it well and use your electricity during off-peak periods.
Because when I had a chance to speak to Eskom a couple of weeks ago, the explanation they gave me, Professor, was I want to just go back to this, us paying for electricity when we don't have it as well. And this is why sustainable power and renewable power is so important as well. The reason given is that South Africans are paying, that are on the Eskom grid, are paying for the availability of energy, not just the use of energy. It's almost though the power has been backed up in the system. It's been deliberately turned off for blackouts, but it's coming back on when Eskom allows us to have it. But we're paying for the ability to get power for when it does come back. And that upset a lot of people here on eNCA that were watching that. Is that your understanding of how it works? When there's blackouts, power's off, but we're still paying because there's the potential energy for when it does come back.
So we have what we call the fixed charges. And in the fixed charges, we have what we call the generation capacity, which basically means that Eskom has got some generation capacity sitting somewhere and waiting to be delivered to our homes. And then we have something that we call the network capacity charge, which is also a fixed charge. And another one that's called the network demand charge, which basically, when you talk of the network demand charge, that is the size of your meter that you have at home. So you pay for that particular size of the meter that you have at home. When we talk of network capacity, you pay for the network or for the line that's coming to your house, because that line needs to be serviced. That meter needs to be serviced. But the amounts are not so big. Those are very small charges in your electricity bill. So yes, you pay as long as there is a meter or a line coming to your house. If you have a transformer, if you are supplied by a transformer, for instance, people like farmers who are supplied by transformers, their network capacity charge is substantially high. So you pay for the.
So it does change from private to commercial use as well. I feel like you need a degree to understand how these Eskom and electricity tariffs actually work. But Prof, I always appreciate you taking time to explain it to us, to make at least some sense of what's going on. Energy analyst Professor Sampson Mamphweli from the University Centre for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies.